I was trying to come up with a good opener to do with this basketball, but just not coming up with anything. What's up, everybody, and welcome to One Man's Opinion. And today we're talking about The Way Back. The Way Back is a movie that came out at the end of 2020 starring Ben Affleck. It's about a coach who has a lot of alcohol problems. Well, to be fair, he's not even really a coach. He was a high school athlete who broke all kind of records. He was like an amazing athlete. When the movie picks up, he's just like a construction worker. The coach who coaches at the high school where he used to play has a heart attack, and the assistant coach has too much going on with his mother's health problems to step in and take the head coach role. And so they go to Ben Affleck and they say, hey, man, you were an awesome basketball player. You're the first person that we thought of to coach this team. We know you've never coached before, but we think you might have the right stuff to bring this team back because, frankly, they're terrible. And that's kind of where the movie takes off. Typically with these things, I always start with the negatives, and you guys know that. But with this movie, we're not going to do it. And that's because a lot of the negatives that I found with this movie were sort of taken away by the end of the movie. And I think it would make more sense for me to just talk about my viewing experience with this movie and then kind of tell you how I felt about it by the end. Along the way, we will cover some negatives, some positives. It'll be much more up to the viewer whether or not they like the direction that this film took or not. It's very difficult to say if that is a good thing or a bad thing at this point. So basically, right off the jump, I went into this movie with the wrong mindset, and it carried throughout the film almost, I would say, until the last half hour. When I watch a sports movie, it's hard not to compare it to other great sports movies that I've seen, especially because sports movies, whether it's football or basketball or baseball or whatever it is, they tend to follow very similar beats. This movie had tidbits of a lot of other movies in it, and that was to this film's detriment in the beginning, or at least in my mind. There's a lot of bad news bears here. You got this guy who's a drunk who shows up to coach a team who is awful, but he ends up kind of bonding with the kids along the way. So there's a lot of bad news bears there, and I was thinking that as I was watching it. I was like, okay, it's a grown-up bad news bears. It obviously deals more with depression and that kind of thing and the alcohol abuse. It's more dramatic than comedy. Whereas Bad News Bears is played off for comedy a lot, this plays it off more for drama. And so I thought, okay, we got a little Bad News Bears going. And then with it being a basketball movie, I couldn't help but compare it to Coach Carter. There's even a player on the team who shows up late and he's really cocky. Ben Affleck just kicks him off the team, and then that player shows up at his house and begs for his position back on the team, and Ben Affleck lets him back on the team. Same thing sort of happens in Coach Carter. So there are a lot of comparisons with other movies, but there's one big difference about this movie that sets it apart from the others. And at first, and maybe still toward the end, I thought it was to the detriment of the film. This movie is solely about the coach. You really don't spend any time with the players unless Ben Affleck is in the room with them. So at practice or games, it's not about them at all. Whereas Coach Carter, Remember the Titans, all of these movies were about the coach mainly, but you still had moments with just the players. That way you kind of got to know them a little bit better, their situation, where they're from. And I think that's a really strong asset to those movies. Coach Carter, Remember the Titans are two of my favorite sports movies of all time. They're amazing films, and it's because you care so much about the kids as well as the coach. This movie is not about the kids, and for the entire length of the film until the last half hour, to be fair, it's not a very long movie. I think it's 108 minutes. You spend all your time with Ben Affleck. And I kept thinking throughout the movie, I wish we had more time with the kids. I wish I knew a little bit more about their home life. I wish I knew a little bit more about their background. That would make this story more powerful. But toward the end of the film, you really get the picture this is not about the team. It's not about them at all. This is Ben Affleck's story. It's a story of a coach, or not even a coach. It's a story of a guy who has had a really bad string of bad luck. You know his kid passed away pretty early on, but you found out about the cancer and how bad it was and how that affected his marriage. You know pretty early on that he's no longer with his wife, but you find out about how all that went, and there's a big apology, and it's called The Way Back because it's about the coach's way back. It doesn't spend too much time on Ben Affleck. It just doesn't spend enough time with the kids. This movie has a lot of very long, depressing shots of Ben Affleck, just standing sometimes, as things around him get quieter, and you can tell it's a framing device showing how he's there, but his mind is elsewhere because he's got no awareness of what's going on around him. He's trapped in his own head. It's a useful framing device for a director, and it's fine in this film, but because it's so short, I'm not saying we should take time away from Ben Affleck. I just think they could have made the runtime of the movie longer. It would have been so much better if you connected with the kids just a little bit more. There are a lot of really interesting characters in this movie other than Ben Affleck, and I think it would have been even more powerful had we have had a little more time to connect with other characters in the story. Now, granted, it wasn't necessarily going for that. It was just Ben Affleck's story. It's really up to the viewer whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. For me, it was a surprising thing because it was so focused on this guy, this coach. He is the coach, but he's not really a coach. It was so focused on him and his alcohol abuse and his depression and that sort of thing. I just expected, I guess, that it would have more to do with the team. Now, this movie isn't all drama. It's not all depressing. There are a couple of genuinely funny moments. The kids in this movie are really great. The teenagers, the team, they're a lot of fun. And when they're on screen, you have more fun. And I think it's a really smart thing that the director or the writers or whoever put this film together, I think it was a really smart thing that they did. Because when Affleck's alone, it is a very depressing movie. Or when he's not with the team, I should say. Because there are times where he's like at a bar with buddies, but it's still pretty sad because he can't even get up from the table and walk home. There's this older gentleman who helps him home almost every night. So it's a really smart juxtaposition where you see him with the team and the whole tone of the movie changes. It's lighter, it's funnier, it's energetic. It's really good, and then you see him separated from that. The one thing, I guess, that really gives him life, that gives him energy, and the movie's energy feels like it's strained out. When you're away from the team, the movie's energy drops. And so I think it's actually a really smart thing that they've done with the movie. Is that good for audiences? Do audiences enjoy those long, dramatic shots, or did they show up for more of a sports movie? And I think it's that duality, that if and but or, that kind of makes this movie either really great if you appreciate what the film is and what they were going for and the acting and all of that good stuff, or really bad if you just wanted to go to a movie and watch a sports movie. There's always good drama in a good sports movie. There's always that dramatic moment. Remember, the Titans was full of it. When Gary Bertier has the car accident and he's paralyzed, it's awful, it's a huge sad moment, but it never lingers there super long. And you even go back to Gary while he's in the hospital bed and he's cheering and he's yelling at the nurse, and it's funny. There's a lot of levity to it. Same thing with Coach Carter. There's a lot of serious dramatic moments in Coach Carter, but there's also a lot of funny moments, a lot of levity to it. This movie has very few moments of levity. It is much more dramatic than those other movies. And again, whether or not that's a good thing, I leave up to you. I will give it my rating, and I will tell you what I thought about it. Just to kind of wrap it all up, basically, this movie was not what I was expecting, and a lot of the negatives I had were geared toward that. But by the last half hour, if you hang on for the last half hour, there's a lot of redemption to this movie. And I mean that both in the film and out of the film. The character in the film finds a lot of redemption in the last half hour of this movie. He really starts to find his way back. And the movie leaves it open, okay? You don't see his full journey, his full recovery. You just leave the movie feeling like he's on his way. He's working on it. He's coming back. He doesn't make it back. So if you hang on for that last half hour and see that this movie never was trying to be a Remember the Titans or a Coach Carter or something like that, and it kind of sits in its own place. It kind of did its own thing and made its own name in a sports movie genre. It's really more about depression and alcoholism and dealing with those things and becoming a better person than it is about sports. It's got a really interesting message, and I think it brings it back around and kind of turns it in a different way than those other sports movies have done. And I think it does it successfully. I think it does a great job. But I could see where somebody would go in and be like, I just wanted to watch a sports movie. And yeah, I expected some drama, but this is not really what I signed up for. I could see where somebody might get that frustration, but I actually thought it did a really good job. It's certainly not those other movies. I think it's its own movie. And I think that's a good thing. It's a gamble. There's certainly a formula for sports movies with the super dramatic ending. It's certainly a gamble because it doesn't follow the tried and true blueprint that we've seen with so many other sports movies. But I think it earned my respect for not following that. And while it's not a perfect movie, I think it does a really good job. So I'm going to give The Way Back a 90 out of 100. Okay, there was one other thing I meant to mention about this movie, and I didn't do it in the review. Real quick before I let you go, there's a really interesting framing device that they use in this movie. Something will be happening in one of the games, and then it will just freeze frame and flash up the score of the game. Something about the way that they did that mid-game sometime. You'd be halfway through a game, and then all of a sudden it would freeze, and it would show you what the final score was. I thought it was a really interesting thing, and it made this movie that is not based on a true story feel like it was based on a true story. There was something very real about the team like getting energized and saying, no, we've still got a chance. We can still come back and do this. And then immediately freeze frame and they got beat by 30 points. Like there was something just so, oh yeah, that is reality. I mean, every high school team, unless you just went undefeated, has been in that situation where you felt like you still had a shot at a game and then just got blew out of the arena. I don't know. There was just, I really liked that freeze frame, and it continued to work even after the team started winning. I thought it was worth mentioning in this review. Okay, have you seen The Way Back? If not, I suggest you give it a shot. If you're a sports movie person, hey, give this a shot. I think you might be pleasantly surprised. At least now you know sort of what to expect going in. I didn't really give away any huge spoilers. There are some pretty interesting things that happen in the movie that I didn't even touch on. So you haven't missed out on anything by listening to this. Go give the movie a watch. Tell me what you thought. Come back here, drop down in the comments. Let me know what you thought. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Be sure to come back and let me know. If you thought it was a trash garbage movie and you disagree with my opinion, don't get mad. Remember, it's just one man's opinion. Thanks.